Our next speaker has been producing and directing and working in video games since he was 14 years old. With over 90 launched games that generated over $7 billion in revenue, he's here to share how he got his start and the lessons he learned along the way. Let's give a big leap welcome to Darian Lowenstein.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey everybody, happy Leap Week. It is awesome to be back. This talk is called Side Quest to Main Story, My Journey from the Woods to Hollywood. And I wanted to share a really honest, in-depth talk of my career, more importantly, how I got started and the lessons that I learned along the way. I think a lot of times it's easy to look and see people that are successful in various forms of life and wonder, okay, well, how did they get there? And oftentimes when they talk about their success, they don't also talk about the roadblocks and things that they faced along the way. So, good question. Why am I here? I've worked on a ton of games. I have produced and directed and been executive at companies like Electronic Arts, Rockstar Games, Activision, Scopely. I've been interviewed in a ton of different publications, been on a lot of different TV networks. I've done a lot of fun stuff with a lot of cool brands that I love. But what have I actually worked on? A lot of different games. These are some of my favorites. Transformers War for Cybertron for Activision, Red Dead Revolver at Activision, NBA Jam at EA, Hogwarts Legacy, Simpsons Tapped Out. I've been very lucky to work with a lot of brands and games that I absolutely love. But how did I go from a small town in Drain, Oregon, don't worry, nobody's ever heard of it, this is my actual childhood home that I grew up in, to a career working with people from Fortnite, Leonardo from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and yes, Taylor begged to take that photo. But I want to share that I had a really simple beginning and a simple childhood. I was homeschooled. God bless my parents. They spent a lot of time teaching me. My nearest neighbor was a half-mile away, so I basically grew up on a ranch on a farm. My first job was at 6 years old, and I was duplicating cassette tapes, yes, I'm old, for my parents' home business. So there I am, literally cropped up on the table trying to make some allowance money so I could afford some Nintendo games. When I was young and being homeschooled, I had a terrible fashion sense that my parents indulged. You can see it there. I'm actually wearing a clip-on tie over a shirt, which was like my thing at that age. But that was the desk where I learned a lot of my schooling my parents taught me for high school. I took a correspondence course called American School that was allowing me to basically do tests at home and then send them in an envelope through the mail. They'd be graded by a school in Chicago, and they'd mail it back several weeks later. So it was a very unique childhood. It allowed me to graduate at 14 and really start to pursue my passions in my career. And luckily, my mother and father, again, were incredibly supportive. My father got me my first job, which was reviewing games for free in a local newspaper. So that was the first step in my career that, while it wasn't paid, it allowed me to start separating something that I loved, right? The fandom of video games, of entertainment. And it allowed me to start thinking about the business side. What makes this game good and this game bad? Why do I love this game? Why did I want to return this game? And that was the start of really thinking about, okay, how would I pursue a career as a game designer, as a games producer? So I always loved gaming. I was a huge nerd, still am, and I, as you can tell in the photo, was never athletic. I always loved Hollywood. I love TV. I love film. This picture is from my one of my first favorite films, which was Mortal Kombat, and I sent letters to the cast, and they actually sent me autographed pictures back. I still have those today. And my father was my first publicist. So when I was 15 reviewing games, I got a small contract working on a local tech startup, and my dad sent out letters to all of the newspapers in Oregon. At the time, I was like, Dad, nobody cares, nothing's gonna come from this. To my shock and surprise to this day, the two top newspapers in Oregon came out to where I lived in rural Drain, Oregon, and interviewed me and ran cover page stories on me. Now, what this did was it allowed a company that was in Eugene, Oregon, which is the nearest city about an hour away, to see this article, call me, and offer me a job at 15 as a game tester, which is the entryway a lot of people get started in games. I was absolutely shocked, and after talking to my parents, I called them back, and I was like, hey, you're an hour from where I live. I turned 16 in 9 months. Can I call you back and start working then? And they're like, yeah, sure. So the lesson from this was always take the leap. I kind of shot myself down at the beginning when my dad wanted to send those letters out, because I didn't really believe that anything would come of it. But it got me my first real job, and it really kickstarted my career. I moved out of home at 16, day after I turned 16. And so this image is what I probably imagine my parents saw when I was walking out the door. You know, this is their kid at 16 is leaving and moving away. I was a game tester at Dynamics, which is part of Sierra Online. Both of these companies no longer exist. And when I started testing, I thought it was going to be this really cool thing where, you know, I was going to be in this room with all these people, and we're like designing the future of games, and it was going to be amazing, like this picture. And then the reality, it's a bunch of sweaty nerds sitting literally this close, eating pizza and hamburgers all day. And you might think, oh, well, but you were a game tester. You got to sit around and play games all day. Like, that can't suck, right? Well, the reality of being a game tester, you are trying to find bugs in games, and you are trying to explain to the developers how you created and found these bugs, and you're helping improve the game. So the reality, let's take Call of Duty. You're a tester on Call of Duty at Activision today. What that means is you're probably working on one map for a year, 2 years, 3 years before that map comes out, and you are constantly looking for bugs and problems, bad textures, areas that fall through the world. But you're in that map 8, 10, 12 hours a day, every day, for months. So while it is more fun than, I don't know, for me, I would never want to do like a finance job or something like that, it is, unfortunately, a real job. So it was a really fun way for me to start. I got to test a ton of different games. I was on some first-person shooters. I was on a mech game. I was on all kinds of different titles. So testing for me was a really great way to start in the industry. I tested 17 games in 2.5 years. So I got to experience a ton of different stuff, work with a ton of different development teams, and really learn a lot of different things about the industry. Now here's the truth about what you test. While some stuff was really fun, like I tend to be more of an action gamer, so the first-person shooter, the tank game I worked on, those were really cool. I also worked on driver's education, which is shown here. Driver's education was literally that for driving. So I had to learn the driving rules of all 50 states. And I had to learn exactly what to do, how to do it, and then report when it wasn't working. But the game was such that if you went a little bit over the speed limit, the instructor would yell at you and the game would stop. If you went through a red light, the game would stop and you'd get yelled at and you'd lose points. So it was like the opposite of Grand Theft Auto. So it was really, really not fun. I was planning on going to college. I had been testing for about 2 years, and I started to enroll in the local University of Oregon. There were no game design courses at this point. This is the late 90s. But I wanted to learn programming, and I wanted to learn Japanese. So I thought, okay, you know what? It's really hard to get out of testing, so I'm going to take some classes. So that was my plan, but then, unfortunately, a frustrating trend in my career happened, which was I got laid off. I was shocked. I was surprised. I had survived a few layoffs at Dynamics at that point, but I had just had a great review. I thought things were going well. And then I got pulled up by my boss and put in HR's office one Tuesday morning, and it was all over. And unfortunately, at this point, you know, I'm 18. I'm also learning a lot about how companies operate and how they treat you. So the first layoff that I survived, I was 17, and I got an email. And the email said, ice cream social upstairs. And I'm like, awesome. So my coworkers and I all go upstairs, and the head of HR is handing out ice cream, and they're like, do you want chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry, all of it? Like, ooh, and there's toppings. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. And everybody's eating ice cream. And we're up on the top floor of this building, and all of a sudden someone looks in the window, and they're like, is that Steve? Why is Steve holding a box with all this stuff? And wait, that's Vanessa, and she's crying, and she's holding a box of all her stuff. Oh, God. So while they brought the employees that survived up to the top floor for ice cream, they meanwhile were laying all the people that didn't off and sending them out the door. So at 17, this was kind of a shocking realization of like, okay, like this may not last forever. I could get let go. And it was tough, but it was a good lesson to learn that every job is temporary. Some jobs you could be at for 10 years. My longest is 5. Some jobs you'll be at for 9 months. You never really know. But ultimately, Every job is temporary. Another good lesson, treat everybody with kindness and respect. Every job that I had after this Dynamics job, I got because someone that I had worked with before was at a company that said, Darian's a great guy, I've worked with him, I really like him, hire him. And that got me the next position. So no matter who someone is that you're working with, whether they're someone grabbing coffee or working at the front desk or they're a VP, just be nice to everybody that you work with, and that reputation will carry you forward into your next job. Another life lesson that I learned at 18, have savings. If I didn't have savings, I would have had to immediately move back home. If I was living paycheck to paycheck, I would have had to move back home. Luckily, I had some savings. I had already started networking, I'd already started building up my resume, I'd already started talking to people when the first 3 layoffs happened. So I had a little bit of a warning sign, and I luckily was able to line up. But always networking, always being prepared for what's next was a really important lesson to learn at that age. Now, that being said, not all was lost. About 2 months after I got laid off, I got a job at a company called 3DO, which also no longer exists. This is my actual cubicle. You can see the cool lava lamps, and yes, I had a hamster on my desk. I got a job as an assistant producer at 3DO, and that was a great experience. I was quickly promoted to associate producer about 5 months in. I shipped 12 different games. The games did really well. They sold well. They were decently well reviewed. But then I was laid off again after about 2 years of being there. So this was another lesson that performance does not equal stability, especially in entertainment. While I thought, hey, like these games are making good money, I'm making the company way more money than I cost to be here, I was ultimately a number on a spreadsheet for a company that was going through some major downturns. But as that door closed, another really awesome door opened, because someone that I worked with at 3DO, my friend Carlos, was working at a company called Angel Studios. And when I called him and told him I'd been laid off, he said, hey, we're hiring producers. I'm going to introduce you to my boss who's hiring. So I went down there, interviewed, and at Angel Studios, about a few months in, it became Rockstar Games. So I would love to say that was all a part of my master plan to work at Rockstar. It was, like many things in life, a very lucky accident. I was there for 5 years, and I produced 5 different games. Rockstar was an incredible experience in a lot of ways. I think that it gave me a PhD in game development. It taught me how to make a great video game, how to manage teams of up to 80 people, how to create world-class product that gets magazine covers. Now, this did not come without a price. My average work week there was often 60 to 80 hours a week, sometimes 100 hours. What that meant was, in my early 20s, I did not have many evenings to myself, and I certainly didn't have very many weekends. I was working so hard. When I was younger, I would call my parents on the way into work every morning. And it got to the point at Rockstar a couple of years in where I would call them at 9 or 10 a.m. And the first question they would ask is, are you going into work or are you leaving work? Because so often I would sleep underneath my desk, work all through the night, go home, sleep for a few hours, come back. And while Rockstar doesn't have hours quite that bad anymore, I think the reality of working in entertainment is that it is not a 9-to-5 job. And if you're looking for something that's 9-to-5, entertainment is probably not the best fit. Another good life lesson for me from this was that being laid off and forced out of 3DO ended up being one of the best things to happen in my career. If I had not been laid off, if I had not been forced out, I wouldn't have gotten the job at Rockstar. So sometimes a door closing and a new one opening can be a really fantastic thing once you get through the pain, the separation, the frustration, the financial, all those difficult things. It can lead to something really amazing. Another lesson I learned while at Rockstar, people will judge you on your appearance. So in this photo, I think I'm 21 at a games conference. I looked, I don't know, maybe 15, but I was producing. I was the boss of, at this time, probably 50-some people, right? So people would meet me, and they'd be like, oh, you're Darian, you must be the tester. I'd be like, actually, I'm the producer, and you're like 30 minutes late to the meeting. So I think it's something that's true of our culture in general. People will judge you on your appearance. I think it was a lesson for me to always, try to prove myself in the right way, but also be really careful about judging people on their appearance, because you never know where they are in life or what they're doing or really who they are. Unfortunately, I have no GTA 6 news. I know it's the first question I get everywhere I go. I, back in 2020, said, it's probably not coming out till 2023. Obviously, I was super wrong. Is it really coming out in March 2026? And Rockstar ships games when they're done, honestly. After this, after 5 years at Rockstar, I was not actually laid off. I actually quit, shockingly, I know. And I decided to move up to LA in 2006 and start working at EA LA. The reason for this, I really wanted to keep my career extremely diverse, and I wanted to understand all the aspects of game development. While I knew how to make a great game, I didn't necessarily understand all the aspects of publishing, of PR, of marketing, of finance, of all those other things that go into making a game happen. So ELA offered me a producer position on Medal of Honor and Command & Conquer, and I was able to learn a lot of things about the publishing side of the business that I didn't have as much experience on previously. After that, I went on to produce Transformers: War for Cybertron at Activision, which is a dream project. I have a really fun story. I'm going to share about that one a little bit later. But I learned a lot about the publishing side from Activision, which every game company is completely different, and it was a lot of different lessons than EA. I went back to EA at the end of Transformers, and I jumped onto EA Mobile on the mobile side. This was around 2010, 2011. And mobile was just starting to become a thing then. And I thought that I would come over, learn how to make a mobile game, and jump back to PC console, which was kind of my comfort area. I ended up loving mobile. I was at EA Mobile for a year and a half. I had 6 #1 games there, like NBA Jam, Simpsons Tapped Out, Monopoly. And I ended up learning so much about the industry. And being on the mobile side opened the door to the next several jobs that I got in my career. And I think the theme here is be open to new things, always evolve, always learn. The big lesson from all these companies, the more diverse your experience is in whatever field that you are pursuing, the more doors that are going to open for you. Because I was coming off of Rockstar, EA, Activision, some of the biggest companies in the industry, a lot of companies were open to working with me. And that allowed me to really pick and choose kind of what I wanted to do next in my career. All 3 jobs ended in Anybody? Layoffs! So yes, reoccurring theme. Again, super successful. I, for the most part, have gotten great reviews. Layoffs just abound. If you've seen the news at all recently for tech and gaming, it has not changed. We've experienced, depending on the numbers you believe, around 40,000 layoffs the last 2.5 years. For a relatively small industry, it's a lot. And so it continues to be a somewhat unstable industry. But while that part is really difficult, I'm going to share one story that was really fun. So I grew up playing Transformers, and as a kid, I was smashing Optimus and Megatron and creating all these imaginary battles in the woods. And when I was working on Transformers, I was managing the relationship with Hasbro, and Hasbro's world headquarters is in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And so I flew out there, I was showing them the game, and when I finished showing them the build of the game, they said, "Hey, we have a surprise for you." And a dude in a white lab coat walked into the meeting, and he's holding his hands like this. And I'm like, does he have like a little bird in there or something? Like, what the heck? He opens his hands, and in his hands is a prototype of Bumblebee. It's a little like resin mold fresh off the presses, and it is designed off the Bumblebee that I was able to contribute to the design of in the game. And so on the outside, I was like, yeah, cool, this is great, very exciting. On the inside, I'm like crying like an 8-year-old because I got to help make an action figure for something I loved. Those toys went on to sell really well, and every time I saw them in a store, I kind of geeked out a little bit because I'm like, oh, I got to contribute to that. The team that built that game was incredible. The artists were amazing, so to have a little piece of that was very, very fun. After EA, I kind of looked at my career and said, what else do I need to learn? And that is when my startup era began. So my first startup was called Digital Artists. It was a company of 5 people. So I went from having teams of 20 to 30 at EA to having a team of myself. I knew it would challenge me. I knew it would be hard. I knew it would be difficult. But I also knew that I would learn a lot of it. And ultimately, I left kind of a stagnant position where it was very hard to move up. And going to startups, I was able to get my first VP position. So it was a rocket ship into the unknown, essentially. I went on to build 4 publishers in a row, learned very different lessons at each one of those. 3 of them have since died, and 1 did extremely well. Scopely, that I built the publishing division at, I think I was employee like maybe number 19, went on to sell for $4.9 billion 2 years ago. Now, obviously a lot of startups do not do that well, and that was a very, again, lucky position to get into because a friend of mine brought me into that company that I'd worked with at Rockstar. I was able to be CMO, which is Chief Marketing Officer at Gambit Gaming for 5 years. So this picture here is actually a basically gambling arcade machine that I helped make. And the idea on it is that you could play multiplayer Pac-Man, and whoever won would actually win cash. So we made it for casinos. When I was offered the CMO position, I initially almost wanted to reject it, and I was scared because the 20-some years of my career at that point had always been VP of production, head of development. I had never held a marketing title. So I was terrified. But at the time, the CEO, my boss, saw something in me that I did not see in myself. He saw someone who probably would not know everything, but would try to learn. And he saw someone who I think had the core elements of what he wanted in his CMO. I was there for 5 years, so I ended up loving the position. All those commercials you saw right before, those were all ones that I learned how to direct and produce. I'd never directed commercials before. And I was able to get a lot out of that position, travel the world, meet with developers everywhere, and more importantly, make some really fun games. In 2020, I formed my consulting company called Secret Code, and the reason for that was that I felt like I had learned a lot of what I wanted to at these different startup companies, and by forming a consulting company, I was able to work with who I wanted to work with. I think as you evolve in your career, if you can get to a position where you can create the path that you want and work with who you want to, that is the most ideal position to be in. A good lesson from this phase, most startups will die, but don't ever stop evolving. You yourself are responsible for continuing to evolve in every way and shape that you can to stay current with your industry. All this hard work, ultimately for me, gave me more options in my career and my life. It allowed me to host my own talk show called Game Guy TV. I did that while I was working at my first startup. It allowed me to star in a Bravo reality show, which was really fun. I did that while I was working at Scopely. I directed and produced those 40-some commercials I mentioned. And in 2020, TikTok reached out and they said, hey, we want someone to come in and talk about video games. And I was like, gosh, the average person on TikTok is like 18. I'm like their father age, I don't know. And again, I was shooting myself down. And TikTok was like, no, you can talk about video games, just do it. So I did the contract and I thought, you know what, why not? It was COVID, couldn't do much. I'll try it. So I started posting videos about my career in games, how I got there, etc. And the second week, I randomly shot a video, posted it, went to dinner. At dinner, I tried to ignore my phone. My phone will not stop vibrating. I'm like, oh my God. So I just put it on silent, ignored it. Dinner's over, get home, take my phone off silent. TikTok, like 3,000 notifications. Sorry, what? So I load the video, and the video is at like 500,000 views, went completely viral while I was at dinner. Again, this is something that I didn't see in myself. I didn't believe in myself. Someone else did. And I ended up going on to have several videos that went over 2 million views on TikTok. My account has close to 1 million likes, which is just weird. But I learned a lot about working with TikTok and, again, about not selling myself short. I think a lot of the fun other opportunities that have been outside my main career, the lesson there is that most of them were created by me. They were things that I wanted to go and learn and put the extra effort in, directing commercials, hosting a talk show. These were all things that weren't really a part of my main career, but they were things I had passion for, things that I had dreams about, and so they were things that I really wanted to pursue. They were going to require juggling. I think a lot of these things were not easy. Again, evenings, weekends. But for me, it was the right path to move forward and figure out how do I achieve all these different dreams. Failure. So I think this is something that I certainly struggled with a lot when I was younger. And it's something that is scary now, but not as scary because I have been through so much failure in my career in addition to the great successes. And I think it's important to remember that most startups and projects fail. But I wouldn't change anything about the projects that I failed in because I learned so much from each of them. So while the companies may have gone on to die, I grew as a person, as an employee, and all of those jobs opened up new doors for me. Every single layoff that I've been through, which is now 7, has led to a better job, more growth, more income, more money, more equity in the company. So even though they were all frustrating at the time, they all led to better things for me. Each chapter was great life experience. The other thing I think it's important to think about as you are starting your first job, you're thinking about leaving, going to your second job, your third job, your fourth job, every job is equity to buy into the next job. So as opposed to just thinking about, okay, this job is going to give me this much money per hour, this kind of salary, and I'm gonna learn this from it, think about at the end of that job, whether that's in 1 year or in 5 years, where does that put you next in your career? Because the equity that you're getting from that current job is what you're gonna use to buy your way into the next job. Think about that interview that you're going to next time. And that's where everything you learn in this job is going to pay off. The other lesson, pursue your dreams, try whatever you can, but always try to keep income going and always try to keep savings, because we are just living in a very unstable world. And I obviously have been through a lot of instability in my close to 30 years of working, and I just, I don't see that changing anytime soon. AI is something I want to talk about. This is something every college, every school that I speak at, a lot of people want to discuss, right? It's something that's a part of our culture right now, and it's something that I think especially people that are going through high school and college are looking at an entire job market that is changing rapidly due to AI. And so I'll share some of my perspectives on it. I think there's a lot of moral implications about AI that are really scary. There's a lot of environmental elements of AI that are really scary to me. But it's not my job to go through those. I think what I want to share with you is my perspective on if I was entering the job market tomorrow, how should I be looking at AI, aside from the moral, environmental, and other terrifying implications of it? It's not going anywhere. I think a lot of people are resisting to it. I totally get it. But I think at the end of the day, it's here, and it's only going to grow in every aspect of what we do. I think that entry-level positions are currently the most affected. And certainly speaking as someone who's in tech and entertainment, the entry-level positions are absolutely, unfortunately, the top category that it's affecting. But I'm going to give you a big secret insider tip, all right? It's between us and I guess the cameras. You know who's not good with AI? Old people. Executives, people who have kids and families and are doing 50 things and running a company and managing large teams. Do they have time to become AI experts? Most of the time, no. So who could that be? I think any time that we go through a major cultural transformation, it does create new job opportunities. This is something that I saw a lot with social media as Instagram was popping up, as Snapchat and TikTok were popping up. I saw a ton of job growth for young people coming out of high school, people coming out of college. Why? Well, because most of the managers, directors, VPs, and executives didn't have time or didn't understand or weren't even on the platform. So who do they hire? A young person who knows all about that platform, can talk it, and knows all of the things about the algorithm and how to create content for that company. And that was a huge, huge job opener for a lot of people I know that got their start in all kinds of forms of entertainment and tech and general companies. I think if you can become the indispensable expert on all things AI, it can be a big job opener. If you're the person who knows how to use Midjourney to create great marketing content, if you're the person who knows how to use ChatGPT faster, if you're the person who knows vibe coding, you're probably going to be the person that has a better shot at getting that first job than a lot of other people. And here's the thing. What happens when you figure out what others cannot? You cover yourself in cash and go jet skiing. No, I just love this GIF, so this is kind of a reason to throw this in here. I think AI in entertainment is it's obviously a very hot topic right now. One of the things to think about for games especially, and certainly in TV and film, is that as technology changes, it changes the space, and sometimes that new technology is a good thing. When Unity and Unreal came along, those are game engines, it allowed game developers to focus more on the core game and making the game fun, as opposed to building the engine. And iPhone's home editing software, right, that allowed directors and writers to create indie films that were more competitive with bigger studios. I think AI is going to level the playing field for a lot of creators. It's going to allow people to take ideas that are in their head and visions that they have and create content for various platforms faster, more effectively, and at a much higher quality than they would normally be able to. Runway and Google VO3 have created a ton of different videos. Eventually, as they evolve, they could democratize film creation. You could see a group of college students making something that is competitive with a Pixar film, with a Marvel film. I don't know how far off we are, if it's 5 years, if it's 10 years, if it's 2 years, but the technology is evolving so fast, I think it's going to allow a lot of creators to do a lot more than they currently can today. It's going to eliminate a lot of jobs, unfortunately for sure, but I think it's also going to allow people to be more creative and bring their dreams and visions forth. Ultimately, I think AI is just going to be more and more prevalent in our society. But I think the people that can make it a skill set and not an enemy are probably going to succeed. So, the point of all this. I think you can achieve your dream career. I was very lucky. My mother and my father always raised me with a belief that I could do whatever I wanted. And that carried through into my adult life. I think it's the reason that I was able to do a lot of the things that I have done so far. And all of you are able to achieve those. So don't be the person that blocks it or says, I'm too old, or I'm not this, or I'm not that, like I have. Because a lot of those things that luckily I was able to ignore it were some of the most fun things I've been able to do in my career. As the future changes, as creation is more democratized, as lower budget film and game content creators become new content channels, if you think about the fact that we didn't have influencers really 20 years ago, Twitch didn't exist. Now these are some of the biggest platforms. They have some of the most famous people with making some of the most money. Things are going to keep changing. TikTok is already flooded with AI content. AI influencers are on the rise everywhere. What does the future look like? Is there going to be a Roblox for new gaming types built by AI by one person that make really fun games that millions of people end up playing? I believe the answer to that is yes. But more importantly, no matter what you want to pursue, whether it's finance or fashion or food or building or gaming or TV or film, my question to you is, what are you going to create with your life? Thank you very much.
You guys have been amazing. Let's take a 10-minute break, okay? But please, really, really 10 minutes, okay? And when you come back, I have something very special.